really an oft-asked question, but what have the two new members of the band added? And if they've taken anything away, what have they taken away?
Well, I don't think they've taken anything away, that's for sure. They've certainly added. It's all positive stuff, I think, in terms of, you know, Billy and Rick joining the band has been just been, aside from their obvious musical contribution, there's also a feeling of fresh blood, you know, a good old transfusion, which the band probably was well overdue for, you know. So I mean, we feel quite revitalised by the whole situation.
Anything to add?
No, that's very much how I feel about it, and it's all positive, and just not harping on it, but certainly, you know, it was time for Lindsey to do and make the move that he eventually did, even if it was somewhat pressured to get an answer out of him which way he really wanted or what he wanted to do. I think out of convenience he would have probably liked the band just to drift into nothingness, so he wouldn't have had to have made that decision that I am leaving, I can't do this. And I'm sure that, you know, I really believe that to be the case. But that is past, and like Christine said, it's nothing but positive, you know, in terms of what we did with the going on the road without Lindsey, with Billy and Rick. It was somewhat of a spunky decision to make, and a quick one. It all happened very quickly. I'm convinced more that it was absolutely the right thing to do, not only to have Rick and Billy join Fleetwood Mac, but to go out on the road.
Makes you wonder what we would have done had we not made Tango in the Night to start with. You know, because there was a certain amount of coercion there too. I mean, it wasn't, we didn't force him into the studio, but the circumstances were such that he was lulled into thinking that this, you know, this is sounding pretty good, you know, because we went in to the studio to cut a song which I'd been asked to do for a Blake Edwards movie called Fine Mess, and it was an Elvis Presley song they wanted. So I asked Lindsey and Richard Dashett if they wanted to produce this. It was over a 3-day period or something, and I said, let's get John and Mick as well. And Stevie was out of town, but the essence of the musicians in the band were there, and we just went in. And I was there. And Billy was there.
Oddly enough, he was singing on it.
Yeah. So we just jammed around a while, playing some of the old songs, and we just had a good time. And it was a situation where Lindsey was really enjoying that, you know. So we started off by just doing a few cuts. I don't think we actually committed to a whole album at that time, did we? We just sort of said...
I think he gathered, because John, Christine and myself, there had been moments prior to that. This was definitely the catalyst, the subject matter that Christine is talking about. But prior to that, there were definitely moments when we thought that we had a commitment to start, and then it never happened. So that there were mumblings in the ranks in terms of, hey, we want to do an album, we want to start one, and definitely hints of we're going to start it with or without you had been floating around, and this really got him off the fence in terms of committing to doing it. He had already started a solo album, which he thought that he could do both, which he tried before, and I said, Lindsey, one, I think it's impossible. Secondly, you will lose your mind, you know, completely if you attempt to do this. And he very quickly, we got another producer, and quite frankly, the truth of the matter was that myself and at that time the band's lawyer, I did that with the full knowledge that Lindsey wouldn't like it. It was actually a trick, because we started.
Get that, Lindsey?
We started the album working with this fella, and increasingly Lindsey liked it less and less.
Who was the guy you're talking about?
It was.
Should he remain? What was his name?
It's No, not Donkey.
No?
He was an old
you mean
engineer
that?
for Russ Titleman or something.
Yeah.
He was.
For the life of me, I can't remember his name.
Was his name Russ?
Greg? Who are you guys talking about?
No.
No, nothing to do with it.
Way before your time, Billy.
What was
You know, I
it?
can't,
Sorry, I went to
I
get a
can't
Coke
remember his
and
name.
I
You know, it was a kind of an Italian name.
He did some lot of stuff with the Powerhouse.
Italian
band.
name.
Oh,
A lot of
God, I don't remember
raunchy
that.
stuff. Great guy, but just not suited to working in this situation. Nothing wrong with it. His just was the wrong thing to do.
Forgot all
And
about that.
ostensibly, as I said, I haven't really even made it very public knowledge, but that I did that in my inner heart, knowing that that would get Lindsey into getting really involved with what we're doing. Because once he committed to doing the album, I knew, knowing his personality, he would prefer things to be going his way versus anyone else's way, and that's exactly what did happen. And Lindsey ended up putting, his 200% worth of energy and stopped his own album, and he's still making the same album he started rather a long time ago. So I know it will be good, but I wish for his sake he would get it out. He's working with Richard Dasher, so that's that situation. If that makes any sense.
How about you, Billy? Did you, now that you're in the band, what do you think you have, what's going to change? Have you affected?
For the better.
Billy's so humble too.
No, I just brought a few tunes in, and like I said, I've known, or like I say, that was the last interview. Yeah.
It's all accumulated.
Yeah. I've known Chris and Mick. Well, I met Mick first at
Many moons ago.
Dick Clark 25-year anniversary party. And my cousin Rocky Burnette had opened for them. And it was a bunch of reasons why we got together. But the bottom line is we started off doing, I got a call one night, I was working on a Bonnie Raitt session, and got the call to go do Saturday Night Live with Lindsey and Mick. And from that stemmed, the band was called the Cholos at the time, called the Zoo. And then this was like 1981, I think. And we'd been working together. I'd written with Christine. Christine had played with the Zoo off and on. I'd done something with Stevie, and I got to know the whole band. And it was kind of like they were some of my best friends, really. And when it came time for the decision, if they'd have got anybody else, I would have been very
put out. As indeed certain other friends of ours were put out.
In a similar situation, though, we would have envisioned you coming on into the band as sort of a hired gun, though, sort of a one-shot deal.
Well, a lot of people thought that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But had you had that intention at all, or had you really had your heart set on becoming an actual member?
Well, no. I mean, when they asked me to join, we knew that we were going to do a tour and then do an album and actually join the band. It was, there was a few times, but God, I tell this story over and over, but right before our first gig, there was a few times where I woke up and I was sweating and saying, because people, I heard a few people say, "Oh, it's great" and everything, but then there was the few people that said, "I wouldn't want to be in your shoes," the
pressure,
maybe going to rip you apart, and the critics, and
oh, I see, yeah,
or this and that, so there was a little bit of that, and you never knew what the fans, we all didn't know what it was going to be like stepping on that stage in Kansas City that first night. But after that night, it seemed all that seemed to be laid to rest, And ever since then, it's been, shall I say, a breeze.
The audience has been really forgiving, though, about Lindsey not being there. I think they'd rather see Fleetwood Mac on the stage rather than us rolling over and playing dead, than they'd rather see us as we are now than no Fleetwood Mac at all. And as it so happens, the band does sound better. The band is stronger, and there's been virtually no sort of heckling for where's Lindsey Bucking.
Not one night. I don't think we've ever heard that. Not one night.
Everyone, the press and the reviews of all, you know.
In fact, there was somebody raised a banner one night at a gig that said it wasn't very nice. It was the F word and then
What's this?
Lindsey.
Oh,
But you know, so that was the way it went. I mean, went off real smooth.
That whole maneuver, which it was, you know. I mean, Lindsey left at very short notice, you know, and we had a tour set up, and we thought, are we going to stop, cancel everything, or what are we going to do? So this is what transpired. Billy joined and Rick joined, and all went very well. But further than that, in the overview, the fact that we did go out on the road and play as a band, and it did go very well, I think put us in very good stead setting up to make this album. You know, if we'd had stopped, certainly the suggestion would have been that Billy and Rick still join Fleetwood Mac, and then we would have made a record. It would have been a long sort of thing with another big gap where Fleetwood Mac wasn't doing anything, and we just thought we're getting going again. So I think I know we're all really glad that we did go out and do that tour, and it paid off dividends
on the record
for us on the record,
because now people know who Billy and Rick are, you know, especially in America and Europe, of course.
And we don't have that, you know. It just all was really smooth.
Yeah, the tone of the answers you guys have been giving so far would suggest that most people think of Fleetwood Mac as they started out with, like Lindsey and Stevie. But the thing, like we were talking before we came up here, our favorite Fleetwood Mac albums go back to the days of Bare Trees and Mystery of
Oh, very much so, yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted, that was my own personal preface to his question, which was that every time new members come into the band, they seem to be in a position to take the initiative, or seem to be encouraged to take the initiative.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
So that is a policy of yours then?
Very much so. I think I couldn't think of anything worse than asking someone to come in and be a clone of a certain atmosphere that was
previous member. Exactly.
I think that is, I hope, is part of the reason why people are still enjoying our music. I think it is reflective of that very policy, if you like. In answer to your question, that people that are brought into Fleetwood Mac and are part of Fleetwood Mac have always inherently they're there because of their talent, their songwriting abilities has always been an issue in terms of who we've chosen. It's always been, a prerequisite almost.
Do you throw caution to the wind, or do you try to temper the suggestions of new members by saying, well, that's a little bit overboard?
No, and again, especially in Billy's case, more so than Rick's, by the time we got to the studio, Billy had worked with Christine, we all knew each other's tastes, and it's just a matter of, you don't come in with a sledgehammer when a feather is necessary, and that's how it was. Nothing needed really to be talked about.
It was already established that Billy and Rick were very much an integral part of the band before we even went into the studio, and there was nothing like that necessary, or nothing like that even suggested.
No.
Just because everyone had already ironed out, or had come to a conclusion in terms of one another's tastes. So we were all very sort of married to that, before we even went into the studio.
You guys seem like you're extraordinarily easy to work with as members, though. I mean, obviously you're probably the best one to ask this. No, I mean, just looking back over the history of the band, though, it seems like you've had some pretty obsessive characters. The last one being Lindsey, Obviously, Bob Welch was somewhat obsessive.
Yeah, he was.
Danny Kerwin back in the old days was,
Danny was
scatty,
obsessive.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, but I mean, you guys have kind of sat back and watched others take the reins, as it were, and sort of supported them.
Well, it's a two-way road, you know. What appears to be sometimes always isn't the case, you know. But certainly in terms of
Guitar players.
Guitar players,
Going on.
they've all gone round the twist.
I'm a little worried.
That's right, he's already round the twist, so you don't have to worry.
But supportive, yeah. I mean, especially my case and John's being the rhythm section, supportive of what is coming and from the singers, the song. And
but John and Mick also have a tremendous feel for what's... I mean, they may not write or sing as such, but they know their intuition is phenomenally sensitive, you know.
I guess also in your case, you've always sort of struck me as the George Harrison of the band. You come up with a couple of jewels, and it's clearly your song, and it's almost like something from a different album. I think when Bob Welch was in the band, your voice really mingled with it as well. But since that time, it's kind of been just you. And like when your solo album came out, it was 100% that. It was pretty much what we've been used to.
Well, I mean, it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if it's my solo album, then that's what you would get.
But the point is, I mean, on the Fleetwood Mac albums, the songs by you, the songs that you would sing, would sound like, unaffected by the rest of the band. They were just like supporting members. Whereas it was your stage, your deal.
Yeah, I guess so. I never thought about it like that.
Okay, just a little point. A little point in passing. One of the things that seems to fuel the band, that accounts for the longevity, is the fact that you always make sure to have a stock of songwriters in the band. It's always talented, a band filled with talented songwriters. So I guess that's one of your main criterion for choosing people.
yeah, I think as far as I'm concerned, I think the band is always, that is a prerequisite. It was I was, as Christine was too, was very much aware of Billy's talents, as a songwriter and player.
And a singer.
Yeah, all that. His personality stinks.
He's an absolutely awful man. We tolerate that, don't we, Mick? These sweets are like unbelievably strong, aren't they? Excuse me. It's poison.
Looking back on the history of the band, what has been the main reason for people leaving the band? Has it been making musical, or has it been
Me.
It's all Mick's fault.
Hang out with
I'll tell you what, there's been
hanging out with
a
him.
lot of different reasons, and they're all probably very varied. You should go into them.
Yeah, major. The only person that actually was literally thrown out of the band was Danny Kerwin, and that was for our sanity and very much for his own sanity. And the fact of the matter, he was very, very highly strung when he joined Fleetwood Mac, and the paranoia was part of his personality. I mean, this is on the serious side of getting into medical, trouble, mental trouble.
Right.
And it just got to a point where none of us could handle it. I was the last sort of bastion in terms of, I would sit with Danny and talk to him. No one else could talk to him, and he couldn't even ask for a cigarette without sort of. He would grab it. Yeah, it got really bad. It was awful. It was awful.
It got to the stage where I would hang on to them like that, so he couldn't take it. Just rip off the filter.
He could just about get, ask for a cigarette, and that was a sort of a major. Yeah, thanks very much.
Oh, it was terrible.
And anyhow, he's not well, and he's not well now.
Right.
No, he's not.
Jeez.
He's in a.
None of them are well now, are they?
No.
They're all.
Oh,
He's worse than Peter.
Yeah.
These are all the guitar players, right?
That's right, yeah.
Jeremy's doing
Jeremy's, I don't know where he is.
some religious
You
cult.
read about it every now and then.
But what was the question? How
did
Why
well, Danny was the only person that was asked to leave, or basically, I suppose, fired by the rest of us. Peter left because he no longer wanted to be part of, one, a money-making machine, two, in his mind, and two, he felt musically that it had come to an end with Fleetwood, and he wanted basically, which is what he did, made the album The End of the Game, which is just jamming with a wah-wah pedal. Some of it is real good, but it doesn't really involve anyone else.
You want to get back to his Jewish roots or something?
Yeah, and there's a whole load of reasons. Bob left because he was disenchanted with the lack of success, and his marriage was caving in, and he thought he'd make a run for it, and it did very well.
It makes them all sound like raving nutcases.
And then Lindsey,
you're listening to your
Oh, okay, no.
Lindsey just ran out of steam. He never really enjoyed touring. I think he enjoyed somewhat being on stage. He didn't enjoy the whole process. Again,
they're all sad stories, kind of. I mean, Lindsey's not in bad shape, though.
Are you kidding?
He's one of the worst.
No, he's very, very highly he is very highly strung.
You should line all those ex-guitarists up on the sofa and ask them individually. Oh God.
I don't know what to say.
There's kind of a common thread here, I think.
There is.
Mental illness or something.
It's horribly true what you're saying,
my God.
and I really don't know
Do you
the reasons
spark the
for
cooler backstage or something?
I don't know what happens, but again, Lindsey would confess himself. He was never really when we were making the Rumours album, which is we already had a pretty darn successful album, the one before. But nonetheless, Lindsey was in the studio, and he was, even in those days, found it hard working with other people. All this stuff is a compromise. This conversation is hopefully a healthy compromise. Give, take, give, and whatever. He found that very hard to do, and I think he ran out of the ability, or even the vague desire, which might have come from one enjoying what Fleetwood Mac most certainly did for him in terms of recognition and his bank account. All those things played part in him coming to that final decision where he realized he didn't have to do it anymore. And I didn't realize how much he really didn't want to be doing what he was doing. I knew that he wasn't really up for it, but in terms of really scarring him, if you like, in his mind, probably this is going to really, I'll be one of the next ones in the loony bin if I allow myself to go on doing something which I should have. He was torturing himself by not making a decision. The end result is we made it for him, really. We put him up against the wall, and he ended up with a little bit of ups and downs, saying he would, then he wouldn't, but the fact of the matter was we made his mind up for him, put him out of his agony, and it was very positive for us. It made for a much happier working situation, and I hope to God that he's, whatever happiness is for him is better. It has to be, because he's doing what he wants to be able to do, which is spend a long time. He's like you mentioned, he's very, very intense. He's very, very talented and private. So he's been in his garage now for 3 years.
Longer.
Longer.
No, he's been on the solo album for 5 years.
He's working with...
So, I mean, one presumes it must be near completion by now.
That he won't let go of it. But he's working on and off with Richard Dashett, who's obviously a mutual friend and very much part of history in the past making of Fleetwood Mac albums up until this one. So that's the state of the nation in terms of guitar players. And the reason, really, apart from Danny, was they all left because they ran out of whatever gas it is they need to be part of a working situation.
The secret of finding talented people to fill their shoes, like you obviously, it leaves a black hole, a vacuum.
I don't think there is a secret. I think it's luck. A lot of luck and a lot of intuition.
Intuition.
I think as far as Mick's concerned, yeah, I think Mick has the strongest intuitive feeling for people that... I mean, in fact, it was Mick that ended up finding Greg Ladoni to engineer / produce this album, you know. We started off with a guy who's a nice guy and a well-known...
Very successful producer.
But just was not... The chemistry wasn't right, you know.
The guy whose name we can't remember.
Well, no, this is another guy. This is Don Gayman.
Don Gayman.
Who's produced John Cougar Mellencamp and a lot of other people. But for us, he was just no good, you know. And it was... I think it was Mick talking to an old friend of his, George Hawkins, that put him onto Greg, and Greg just fell into the... It's all to do with chemistry, you know. It's got a lot to do with chemistry, a lot to do with... aside from having the right musical talent, it's really got a lot to do with the individual personalities, you know, whether we can all... The egos will allow themselves to buff off of one another and work in that way, you know. If they are the right kind, and we've all got big egos, but is it the right kind of ego, you know? So it's chemistry largely.
I mean, it just seems uncanny. You guys don't seem to be capable of making a wrong move, you know.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
It's just going back with the history of the band. You know, it's like every time there's been a change, it's been like for the better.
That's nice to know. I mean, it's
so far so good.
Yeah.
So far so good. Big song you just started a few years ago.
Yeah, right. Well, we've got another 20 years to go yet, haven't we?
Really?
That's...
You can't attribute it to anything but intuition.
Some of it's been lucky accidents too. I mean, you think about when Stevie joined the band. Initially, it was Lindsey we wanted, and it was because that they were a duo. That I remember the big conversation with me, you know, Mick and John came to me and said, well, you know, that Lindsey and Stevie are like this, and he won't consider joining unless she joins too. And it was the first time I've been confronted with the situation of having another girl in the band, you know, because I've been used to being the only lady and being, you know, spoiled and pampered. The men have always been very nice to me in this band. And so, you know, I said, well, provided I like her, I don't see why not. You know, I'll be very open-minded about it. I'll be honest. I'll tell you, if I don't like her, then I'm sorry, but it'll be a no-go. You know, I remember meeting her and Lindsey at Mick's house in Topanga Canyon. No, Laurel Canyon. God knows how many years ago now, and I just remember instantly realising she was extremely different from me, which is good. But I also liked her very much. You know, my instincts, you know, told me that I could get on. I could get on with this girl. You know, I liked her sense of humour, and so it sort of went from there really. And it was, you know, by way of saying that was an accident. I mean, that Stevie joined the band turned out to be, like you were saying, like it seemed like a good move, but it was a lucky accident, really, you know.
There's a lot of luck involved. I remember a time when I first joined the band, we were in England, and something happened. There was a ferry strike, so we couldn't get the gear over to Europe or whatever. And John McVie said, "Don't worry, it'll work out for our best. This band always lands on his feet the right way." And it turned out working out for the best, because we ended up doing another gig and worked out. The ferry strike was over, and it all worked out. But it's like he said, "Don't worry, this is the way this band is. We will land on our feet on this one."
Somehow.
And I remember that, sticking in my mind from being, a new member, and like it seems to always work out that way.
It's good to have a lot of faith, I guess, in what you're doing, in destiny and everything else.
Well, it's kind of funny because obviously God looks after you guys and rubs everybody else's face and shit. What could have happened on the face? Come on.
Oh dear.
Okay, I guess we'll take some photos now.
Enjoyed it.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's it?
that's it.
Was it? That's a hell of a last line. Oh God.
Well, maybe that won't be printed. Just a passing comment. Doors.